welcome to Bitcoin and Me to Freddie New. Hi, Freddie.
Hey, Gary. Thank you very much for having me on. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. We've tried a few times to get this going, and for various reasons it's been pushed back, but glad to see the stars have aligned, and here we both are.
Yeah, hunting of the snark. You finally got it. Nicely done.
So I'm sure most people who are listening to this will know who you are, but maybe you want to just, if there's one or two that don't, maybe just give a minute or two background to who you are and what you do within Bitcoin.
Sure. So within the Bitcoin space, along with Susie and a couple of others, I co-founded Bitcoin Policy UK back in early 2023. So for the last good couple of years, we've been contributing as much to certainly the legal and regulatory conversation in Parliament and at the FCA and so on, trying to effectively drag the regulators and decision makers into the 21st century. Understanding things like the difference between Bitcoin and the wider crypto market, understanding how the system works, that the normal way of effectively blocking or censoring transactions doesn't work in this kind of system, and how they can possibly adapt to a world that they don't either understand or don't want to know anything about. So that's been my side job. In my day job, I was a lawyer for a long time. First started off in the city, working on private equity, M&A, venture capital work, restructuring insolvency, special situations, all with a sort of corporate bent, and then took a segue into startup work in sort of 2019. Private practice as a lawyer, as we may go into, is slightly dull and dry. Some of my best friends are lawyers. Don't want to be mean about them, but I really wanted to work in early stage venture capital backed companies if I could, and I was lucky enough to inveigle my way in eventually. And as part of that, a lot of the focus that I had there was on fintech and paytech, and that sort of led me into founding BP UK along with my co-founders.
Fantastic. Well, I think a lot of accountancy and legal work is quite dull and dry, but hopefully we can try and break the mold and keep the conversation at least relatively interesting for the next hour or so.
I've got lots of horrible stories about things that happened while at a law firm, although they're not technically all related to actually law, but I'm happy to, as long as I don't libel anyone or slander anyone, then I'm happy to go into some of those.
Okay, well, the first question I ask all my guests, Freddie, is what's your earliest memories of money?
Ooh, that is a really good one, actually. Probably tooth money, I think. And actually, I don't remember anything before Zimbabwe. And actually, it's interesting you bring that question up. So I had a little money, I had a little piggy bank in the shape of a globe. I think it was issued from Standard Chartered Bank or something. I used to keep my pocket money in there, and I remember I stuck one of my lower teeth could come out in the mid to late 80s, and the going rate for teeth in Zimbabwe then was $2 per tooth. I stuck this $2 note in this piggy bank, and then one reason or another, I think I then moved away from piggy banks. It must have been 8 or 9 at the time, and about it was a good 15 years later, I found, might have been even more actually, I found that piggy bank, and it still had the $2 note in it. But by that point, obviously $2 in Zimbabwe dollars was so small as to be actually unmeasurable. The equivalent value in Zim dollars at the time was about $500 billion. So it would have been 500 billion per tooth. And actually in my bathroom, I've got that $2 note on a pin board. Well, I had it framed actually on a board with the 500 billion. That was a 1988 $2 note and a 2018 500 billion. Same purchasing power.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Actually, that's fantastic, but very depressing at the same time.
Yeah, very depressing. Good question though.
Yeah, well, it's probably the best answer I've had, to be honest, Freddie, of all of these ones well, it's just because A, it's interesting, and B, it does lean into monetary debasement, which I think in the UK probably, or generally in the Western world, I guess, it's the same story. It's just much slower pace. Whereas in Zimbabwe, I mean, we can touch on your life there as well. Actually, it'd be interesting, but clearly it was just on a much quicker scale. So even from getting $2 for a tooth, either the tooth fairies became much richer, or effectively the economy was in such a position that the monetary debasement just meant that, well, it stopped effectively being legal tender, to, that currency that you received for a tooth stopped having any value whatsoever.
Yeah, it doesn't technically exist anymore. I've still got a few physical coins from the 80s in the day, and they were really lovely. They had Zimbabwean coins used to have the Zimbabwe bird on one side. I don't know if you know don't know what the reference is. Actually, I've got a Zim flag up here, so that's the Zimbabwe bird there. It's old soapstone carving that crops up all across Zimbabwe, in particular at a collection of stone ruins down in the south of the country, which is actually where the country gets its name from. Zimbabwe means houses of stone. So that the currency used to be beautiful, and then the coins had Zimbabwe on one side, and then things like the Balancing Rocks or Victoria Falls on the other. And the last time I spoke to someone from Zim, who's actually he's a Bitcoiner. That's why we're chatting. He's maybe 20 years younger than me. He's never seen a Zimbabwean coin,
Wow.
which is nuts. The
Yeah.
denominations are just
So through your childhood, then obviously you said that was about 15 years between you losing a tooth and then refinding your tooth money and realizing it was worth nothing. How did your experience of living through that kind of shape you, and what was that like as a child?
it's interesting. And I think it's important to remember that why I didn't see that hyperinflation at its worst in Zimbabwe. So when I was there, and the inflation rate was it ranged from memory between 50 to 70%. So it's really, really painful, but it's similar to what's happening in Turkey at the moment in terms of purchasing power destruction. So everyone knew that stuff was getting more expensive. Everyone knew that it was harder and harder to make ends meet, but it hadn't hit the ludicrous levels of hyperinflation that it hit after we left. For context, we left Zim 1996, and the inflation got extremely bad slightly less than a decade later. So by the time I found that $2 note, all of its purchasing power had been totally wiped out. But when we left, you could still buy a Coke for $2. So it's like a circular economy. You buy Cokes, your teeth rot, your teeth fall out, you get money for them. It's like a deposit system.
So why did your family leave? Was it because of the economic conditions in the country that your family decided to leave?
Actually, no, it was really prosaic and a complete coincidence. My dad had been in the British Council. Zimbabwe was his last posting. After he left the council, we stayed there, and we liked the country. I was finishing my O-levels, as they were at the time, and we had a rough plan. I was the eldest of four kids. We had a rough plan to come back to the UK for me to do A-levels, my sisters to do O-levels, GCSEs, and then go through the university system in the UK. So yeah, it was just a complete coincidence. Crossed the border in '96, and then a couple of years later, the country began to spiral downwards into, unfortunately, both the economic and political turmoil that it's seen since then.
Well, so with you as a child growing up, then what other kind of influences on money did you have? Like, how were your parents with money, and were you quite frugal, or did you like to spend?
We had to be pretty frugal because we didn't really have a huge amount of money at all. So my dad, he left the British Council early. He got into a dispute with the council at the time. We don't need to go into the details, but it ended with him leaving a couple of years before his retirement age. He therefore didn't get as much of a pension as he should have done, and he was also pretty jaded at that point. So frankly, we were not, obviously not destitute. We still owned a house, and my dad got work for a couple of years just before his retirement at the school where I worked. I was at St George's College, but we didn't have very much cash, and we grew a lot of our food. We had a small holding. I had about 200 chickens, so we grew a lot of maize, grew a lot of potatoes, that all hoed by hand, using child labour myself, and and my siblings.
Although at this point, you're what, like 17, 18?
No, not quite that old. So I spent a lot of time hoeing from about 13 or 14 onwards.
Okay.
I was doing the chickens at 10, 11, 12, and then heavy manual labour from about 11, 12 onwards. I was 16 when we left.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
answer your question is we didn't have a lot of money and we lived very, very frugally and in as self-sustained a way as possible.
And did you take that approach through to your adult life, do you think?
Well, I think it's the kind of thing that it sinks really deep into your psyche. I am subconsciously always aware that everything may collapse at any moment, and probably I'm much more risk averse in many ways than I should be. I have an absolute horror of taking on debt, and I think that was further emphasized, I think, by my work in insolvency law. Debt is, as you well know, that's a company killer, and being unable to service it, and we may talk about the national debt at some point in this conversation, being unable to service it is what really fucks you. Yeah, so I think in terms of childhood experiences taken into later life, a huge focus on frugality, on living within your means, on not incurring debt, on always being able to pay your dues when they fall due. Which are, they're good principles, but sometimes it would be fun to be a little bit more reckless, I suppose.
Yeah, I think we're all shaped by our experiences, aren't we? And it's natural that's going to have a significant impact on the way you live your life. And I think sometimes people go the opposite way, don't they? I've got friends who maybe they grew up in a environment where they maybe didn't have much. They've done well and spending money like it's going out of fashion. I think either you kind of you adopt that approach yourself, or you almost not necessarily rebel against it, but you feel free from the shackles of what you had as a child and think, well, I don't need to live that way now. But I
Yeah,
guess, yeah, it's one way or the other.
that's a good point. I think occasionally I mean, everyone's got a moment of madness, haven't they? And I think for me, going to university and suddenly having a student loan, more money than I'd ever had access to before. I mean, by way of example, in my gap year, I'd worked at a school as a sports coach, and my parents took that money that I'd earned and used it to pay my brother's school fees. So I worked for a whole year for nothing.
Nice.
Then you go to university, and then suddenly, boom, and then I mean, in a way, I regret that because then God, it took me until I think I was in my 30s by the time I paid off my student loan, which is mental, considering that I went to work in the city.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's even worse now, isn't it? I mean, if you come out of university now, you've probably got what 50 grand's worth of debt, I'd imagine.
Potentially, I had 50, but that was with university and law school.
Okay, okay. Well, and you obviously came out earning significantly above the average graduate, I would imagine, in that profession.
Yeah, but then I remember the first 2 years, certainly as a trainee, you're not on a gigantic salary. You're on a lot of money. When you're, like I said earlier, in relation to your loan repayments, I had credit card debt at that point. I had student loan, obviously living expenses in London. So I would, even on that salary, by the time obviously that all comes out of your after-tax income, your net income, I had virtually nothing left at the end of each month. So you're literally just paying down your debts.
Yeah, it's not the nicest way to live, is it? And sadly, there's more and more people living that way right now.
Well, it's nuts. If I was feeling that in one of the most highly paid jobs in the country for my age group at the time, how the hell is anyone else managing? It makes no sense.
Yeah, and it doesn't give people hope, does it?
No.
There's no point. If you get a job and have to start paying it back, an option is just not doing anything and just
Yeah.
seeing where life takes you.
Well, particularly when, and not to jump on the welfare hobby horse, but particularly when it may actually turn out that you're better off not working and not having to repay those obligations, not have a tax burden, getting assistance with housing and other things you need. The maths may simply state that you're better off economically not contributing, which is
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah. I mean, that's again. I don't think that's a left or a right issue. I think we've had that in our tax system for as long as I can remember. It's just that I think they're getting more extreme now because even when you start losing your personal allowance when you earn over £100,000, that's a lot of money. That's a high salary. But 15 years ago, there were far fewer people earning that than there are today because of inflation. So more and more people again, almost getting to that threshold. And I think you start losing, if you've got children in sort of nursery, you get some subsidy from the government, some kind of child. I can't think exactly what they call it, but, and you start losing that. So there are people who are getting close to that threshold, saying, "I now want to go to 4 days a week, not 5, because if I start earning over that, I lose a whole lot of tax benefit and other benefits." So we're disincentivizing people to earn more money, even those that are quite high up the ladder already.
Yeah, well, there are 2 points there. With one is fiscal drag, and the other is a productivity trap. So the fiscal drag point you made, if thresholds of these things are never adjusted, then more and more people are pulled into the net as inflation destroys the real value of the money. The most interesting one I quite like is, I think it's the Bank Secrecy Act in the United States, which is an old piece of legislation. It's like 30, 40 years old. They set the disclosure threshold, I think, and you might want to fact check me this, I think it was set at $10,000, which back then was a quarter of the price of a house or something. Now, obviously, you can spend $10,000 on really expensive television, I believe. So, and they haven't adjusted the threshold. So the number of reports that have to be made under the Bank Secrecy Act is mind-boggling. And then the second point, the productivity, if it's genuinely not worth, and in some cases actively harmful to your own personal well-being, financial and otherwise, to earn more than a certain amount of money, why would you bother? Why would you start a business? Why would you work harder in an existing role? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it's with the situation we're in this country, and lots of countries are in, with the amount of debt that we've got. It surprises me that in our Bitcoin echo chamber these things come up, but actually in more mainstream media it doesn't really seem to get any kind of gravity, as to say, look, how do we unlock people's productivity potential and their willingness to want to work more and earn more without penalising them so hard that they just aren't incentivized to do so.
I mean, I think like a lot of things that we do, most of this started off with good intentions. And if you look at the very earliest origins of the welfare state, I think there are principles in there that most people would agree with, which is that if people are desperate, then we should help them. And I'm relatively left-leaning myself. I don't enjoy paying tax, but I pay a lot of it. It's the Laffer curve point, isn't it? I'd like to help other people with my taxes up to a particular point, but once you tip over the top of the Laffer curve, then you begin as a government to be able to bring in less tax, because ultimately the people who were paying most of it have had enough, and they have set up their affairs, whether locationally or otherwise, so they don't pay any more. And I think most people who have done well feel a certain sense that, or perhaps a duty that they should give back in some respect. And an easy way of doing that, or at least telling yourself you're doing that, is via paying tax. And if you can, I don't know, perform the mental game of pretending that the tax that you pay goes directly to causes that you like, it's nice to know that maybe the tax which you pay in a year can support, 2 nurses, 3 nurses, something like that. But then that's before you get into the inefficiency drive. Civil servant numbers are a favourite one of mine. I think we've got another 150,000 civil servants now than we had in 2019 before COVID. Why do we now? Exactly.
What
And
what exactly are they doing?
what are they
What are
doing?
they? Yeah.
You and I are paying their salaries and their
Well,
pensions.
although I guess we're paying part of their salary, and the rest is just being printed and borrowed, and yeah, that's the sad part.
Yes, I suppose we're paying that bit through debasement of any money that we actually have.
They're the sort of things that we don't vote on, and they're very hidden. And again, they don't. The general public aren't generally aware of those kind of statistics, and that how's that happened? How's that manifested? Who's making those decisions? Why is it not? Why is it not voted on? Why is it not something that political parties might discuss and say, well, we're going to address this, and the other political party says we're going to make civil service even bigger. It's almost like it's just it's under.
I mean, honestly, I think the majority of people don't find this stuff interesting,
Yeah.
and an awful lot of them wouldn't care even if it was told to them. And I think a lot of the people who end up in positions of power are exactly those kind of people. So, look, and again, I've got a small sample base here, but talking about my own personal circle, I read I did classics at Cambridge. I was friends with a lot of economists, and I know a lot of people who did like PPE and the like from Oxford. And you get funneled from Cambridge into, and if you typically you'll go into the city or into the civil service. The more left-leaning people will go into the civil service, the more right-leaning people may go into the city. But there's not a hard and fast rule. But weirdly, both groups of people, my contemporaries from Cambridge, are equally ignorant of and dismissive of Bitcoin, which I find a weird kind of statistic to think about. So my friends who work in the civil service don't care about money. They think earning money is bad. They think that it's the job of government to do pretty much everything, and that government can do it better than anyone else. I disagree with a lot of those ideas. I think there is a rule for government, but I'm a small government guy. I believe that the role of the government should be restricted to things such as ensuring a decent legal system exists and that the laws are enforced. Those laws should protect persons and property. The government should also deal with foreign diplomacy and protecting the borders, and should maintain domestic and external security, those kind of things. And then you can have a bit of extra healthcare and welfare and pensions on top for good measure to help those in society who need help the most. So my sort of civil service friends in Cambridge are super focused on the state knowing best, the state doing everything, and they're the kind of people they're nice people, they're my friends. They would advocate for ID cards and for the government controlling money. So my closest friend, my roommate from Queen's at Cambridge, he's a massive fan of the People's Republic of China, and he is obsessed with it. I think he hates Bitcoin because it's a money the government can't control, and he thinks the government must control money. That's quite innate to his personality. My economist friends, on the other hand, the ones who've worked in the city, they're more of a sort of Jamie Dimon school of thinking about Bitcoin. Oh, it's a scam, it's a Ponzi, it's rubbish. And I think the reason they think like that is because heuristically, Bitcoin looks like a scam to them. They've been very well trained, both at university and subsequently, to spot things very quickly that look suspect. And I think a lot of us probably had a similar experience to me. We didn't come to Bitcoin immediately. I spent a lot of time thinking it was a scam. And as a result, I'm talking to you from, our spare room and not from a palm-fringed island somewhere in the South Pacific.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit like the Jesse Myers article about, yuppies. Yuppies can't understand it because you've got the money go up idiots on one side. You've got the people who have studied it and kind of the real hardcore Bitcoiners on the other, and then in the middle you've got these people who just they don't need it. They're doing quite nicely from their life with what they've got, and there's no real incentive for them to try and understand it because, I'm in a secure job working for the government, or I'm earning massive bonuses from my investment company that I work for in the city. Why would I even be interested in this kind of weird internet money thing that you talk about?
Yeah, you're completely right. Actually, I couldn't have summed that up better myself. They are not people who need it. So, as you say, you're either employed by the government, and obviously you and I know they do actually need it, but they don't realize it yet. Actually, something you were saying about the inflation rate earlier was interesting, I thought. I've often felt that the target 2% inflation rate is a useful arbitrary number because it's high enough to enable the government and banks to benefit from the Kantian effect, but it's not quite so high that your economy collapses or people start protesting in the streets. So it's an interesting mental game to think about why it's set at that level. There's no particular reason for it. I think the 2% target was originally devised by the New Zealand central bank, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd heard that, and I think there are some views as well that I think this might be a bit of a tenuous link, but isn't broadly the gold, the amount of gold available inflates by around about 2% a year. So it's almost like a nod back to, well, if gold increases by 2% a year, then maybe inflation at 2% a year is maybe a reasonable number to pick.
That's interesting. It's like the stock to flow.
Kind of, yeah, maybe. I mean, more than likely, it was just about 3 people in a room in New Zealand one night and said, yeah, let's just do 2%. And then suddenly every central bank around the world and government latch onto it. And I think, as you say, it's low enough so it doesn't feel like you're being robbed, and it's reasonable. Like most people, a lot of people, not most people, a lot of people who don't research too much into it would look at that 2% themselves and think, well, if I'm getting a 3% pay rise every year and inflation's 2%, I'm getting richer. And so like they try and, and so 2% just doesn't seem like a big number. And I put some money into a savings account that's giving me 3%, and so these other percentages seem bigger than 2%. So if it's 2%, that's fine. But as we know, there's ways to manipulate the reporting of that 2%, and you get a spike like COVID, and suddenly it wipes out 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of 2% inflation in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Well, even if the 2% is real, which we both suspect it is not, most people forget to deduct that reduction in purchasing power from their savings in a bank account. So, for example, if you stick 1,000 into your regular savings account, and you're earning 3.4% now. You'll think fantastic. So I'll be quids in by the end of the year, but they don't deduct the 2% reduction from the year end amount, do they? You only begin to do that, I think, when you hit slightly sillier numbers. It's interesting right now to look at what some of the major banks are doing in their interest rates. I think we've suddenly hit a point where banks like Monzo, NatWest are now below the rate of inflation in terms of the interest rates they offer on their savings accounts, which is interesting. So we're back at a point where you can be getting 3.4% in a savings account, but inflation is at 3.6, 3.7. Latest figures 3.7, I think.
I think wasn't it 3.8? Wasn't it unexpectedly
3.8?
3.8?
Might.
Maybe. I mean, I love every time there's something pops up on my phone about expected, unexpected. I go straight to you on Twitter, because like every time it's great.
I've made a rod for my own back, though. It started off as a bit of a joke, and now I literally can't not post something about it. But it drives me absolutely fucking mad, as you've probably gathered. If people aren't aware of it, it's the habit of modern journalists to report every kind of financial news as unexpected. I know government borrowing higher than expected, or inflation higher than expected, or government interest costs have leapt above expectations. I kind of understand. I mean, the principles behind it are obviously these things are normally given in a range, and if it falls outside the range that's being predicted by most economists, then it's called unexpected. I think it's just bad reporting. But apparently, the reason that it's reported like that is simply to get people to read the article. People are more likely to read an article if something is unexpected. So I understand the logic behind it, but actually seeing it every goddamn time just makes me want to brain myself on the computer.
I've often wondered as well whether the reason it's reported that way is because, again, the general public broadly trust experts. So if they then hear it was unexpected, it feels more of a blip, and it's not going to repeat itself. So don't worry about this because it was unexpected, and we know what is going to happen. We just got it slightly wrong this month, but we'll be okay next month. We'll be back on track. But then every single month is unexpected again.
Yes.
So at some point, even someone who isn't, doesn't mentally challenge that themselves, at some point they'll say, how can it be unexpected every single month? That must mean these experts that are guessing what it's going to be can't guess it very well at all.
Yes, and I'm very skeptical about everything being planned or a conspiracy, but it becomes difficult to imagine that this isn't deliberate after you've read dozens and dozens and dozens of the same kind of headline. I'm also skeptical of collusion between regulated governments and newspapers. Generally speaking, it's hard to get 5 friends to meet in the pub, so trying to get a large number of people to collude to do anything normally doesn't function very well. But at the same time, it's undeniable that certain vested interests are able to exercise influence over what you read and what you're told. We know that the editorial voice of these newspapers is often the product of one person's viewpoint or a small group of people, and so that the tone with which they will report things, to the extent that they're not publicly owned, is manipulated. And even in the case of the BBC, if the Daily Mail is influenced by the views of the Daily Mail's owners, then the BBC will inevitably be influenced by the views of the BBC's owners, and the BBC is a government-owned corporation, so you draw a line there.
Yeah, but again, if you do you ever find yourself having those kinds of conversations with your Cambridge left-leaning and right-leaning friends, and get told that you're just in some kind of weird Bitcoin echo chamber? Don't be so stupid, Freddie.
Tend not to try and bring this kind of stuff up, to be honest. Because people wouldn't want to hear it. And I mean, remember when you're being mean about the establishment, it's us. I am part of the establishment. I sound like the establishment. I have an establishment background. My friends literally are the establishment. One of my best friends, she was principal private secretary to the Treasury, and then she was the right-hand person in number 10 with Rishi when he was Prime Minister. So she was literally in the room. In fact, there was a series of photos on Mumsnet when Rishi had to go to Buckingham Palace to accept the position. People were saying, "Is that woman his wife? Why is she carrying an M&S bag? And couldn't she have put on a better coat?" That was Liz.
Wow, fantastic. So, without betraying any confidences, did were there any interesting insights or stories that you would be prepared to share?
Well, I met Rishi a couple of times. Once when he was at Treasury, and once when he was Prime Minister. The funnier time was when he was actually Prime Minister. I won't give her surname to avoid embarrassing her. So Liz was having a birthday party at her house in Islington. We turn up, and it's one of those houses where you leave the ground floor and you leave the street level, go down, and then you enter the house through the ground floor, which goes into the kitchen. I suppose like the upper basement level. So wandering there, the door's open, no one on the door. Wander into the kitchen, and there's a guy there in a blue jumper bending over the stove. He comes out with a plate full of like vol au vents or something. Turns around, it's the Prime Minister. He's getting canapes out of the. I mean, Liz must have briefed him on our names, but he pretended he remembered me from the previous year. It's like, "Oh, hi, Freddie, how are you doing?" It's like, hello, Rishi, how are you doing?" And then, would you like a canapé? So yeah, thank you, that would be really nice. So take a canapé, chat with my wife for a little bit, laugh. Rishi wanders back in with the canapes. And then next thing you know, he's coming over with a bottle of champagne and some glasses. And would you like some champagne? And, he doesn't drink.
Yeah.
Liz has got in there serving food and alcohol at her party. She's somewhere out in the garden, haven't even tell Lota yet, and the Prime Minister's already pushing canapes and
Wow.
champagne into my hand. So that was a strange experience.
Do you think there's any good intentions within politics in general, or do you think it's just we're too far gone now?
I think everyone goes in with good intentions. Why would you do that job if you didn't want to change things? I mean, I have a very low opinion of most politicians. Rishi, I liked. I thought, and he'd got a stellar career before he became
Mm.
in Parliament. He was the kind of person who would have been one of my clients back when I was a lawyer, and he was also very wealthy, so he didn't need to go and be a politician. Whether you agree with his politics or not, I think he probably went into it for the right reasons, wanting to change stuff and to make things better. I'm sure a lot of people do that, but from my understanding from how things work, based on not just external sources, but people who are actually in the system, it's like trying to upgrade the London Underground. It's so old and embedded and convoluted and labyrinthine that it's almost impossible to get anything done in the civil service or in a department. I take the appointment of a new minister, for example. Where just before we came on air, I think I saw the first scoop that Angela Rayner may have resigned.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I'm obviously not up. I haven't got the news feed up at the moment, but I think that happened just before we started recording. And I also read that Poppy, somewhere or other, whom was appointed as investment minister, may be resigning as well. So a lot of my friends work in these large departments, whether in the Foreign Office, it's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office now, isn't it? It's not Foreign Office anymore. They will be sitting there doing their stuff, reporting, going to their meetings. They could do many meetings, and then a new minister comes in, really wanted to change something, got lots of new ideas, and then they just run up against this inertia of a civil service who only want to work 24 hours a week and do 3 days on, 4 days off.
Yeah.
there's a process of going through endless meetings and getting signed off, and then before you know it, the minister's either resigned or been sacked or moved on. So if you're
or just got bored of asking the same questions and getting hit with the brick wall every time. You just can't make change happen.
yes, exactly. The huge imponderable weight of labyrinthine bureaucracy is so difficult to cut your way through that it's very difficult to understand how anyone could make effective change, no matter how well intentioned they were.
Yeah, and you must have come up against that as well with Bitcoin Policy UK, with dealing with a minister maybe getting somewhere, and then that minister goes, someone else comes in who's you're almost starting all over again.
Oh, completely right. I think I'm on my fourth city minister now. So for context, the key point of contact for us would be the full title is Economic Secretary to the Treasury. Shorthand, it's City Minister. So who was it? It was Andrew Griffith to begin with, who was good. And we've had decent contact with him afterwards as well, even though he's on the shadow benches. Bir Mafalami, who was actually a friend of mine from Freshfields, he was a lawyer a couple of years below me when we were both at the same firm. Who came next? Tulip Sadiq was decent, actually, in fairness to her. And I think we were having good correspondence with her. And then she, unfortunately, was removed from post. Emma Reynolds, I'm not very happy with. She doesn't understand Bitcoin. She parrots the party line. She shows no interest in putting her mind to understanding how it works or what it is. So I'm afraid that we've drawn a short straw there.
She responded to some of your posts, didn't she? And it all got a bit silly, really.
Yeah, she did. That was funny, actually. I've forgotten that. She came back with a snarky comment or something. So obviously I pretended not to see the snark and then gave her lots and lots and lots of information that we'd written over the years.
Yeah, yeah. And in that process, one of the things I'd be interested to talk to you about is obviously as Bitcoiners, we generally have a pretty poor view of crypto. Yeah. So again, depending on your view and your experience and how much you've looked into any of them, it might be that they're all just shit coins, or there are some that might have some utility but not really any value. It's just a business that's kind of masquerading under crypto. But in your experience, coming up against people who are trying to influence politicians with said coin or platform or whatever it may be, what's your view on the rest of crypto? I know that's a really general question, but particularly on the people that are working within them. So do you think there are some really well-meaning people trying to change the world in the same way we believe Bitcoin has done and is doing? Or do you see it all as just a little bit woolly and a bit too fiat and trying to just earn lots of money?
Well, there's a lot of questions there, actually.
Sorry, I know.
No, no, it's good. I'll try and remember everything. The first thing to say is that I think you're in a situation not dissimilar to politics, where a lot of people working in the industry will be decent, hardworking, intelligent people who want to do something good with their lives. Whether or not they're doing it in the right way is questionable. On specific examples, a very good friend of mine from Zambia, he and I were at school together. He moved to Zambia. I moved to the UK. He is a Bitcoiner, but he also stakes ADA. He knows that I have a low opinion of Cardano. He's obsessed with it, but his ADA staking is all donated to charity. He has a little foundation called Mind Zampool, yeah, and they build beds and donate them to orphanages in Zambia. So there's a tangible example there of someone working on a coin that I personally consider a shitcoin, but the end results of it are that kids are getting decent accommodation, decent places to sleep, and these are kids who have nothing, who are the most deserving of help of anyone. So I'm a little bit more charitable sometimes about people who do have interest in the industry, and I know several developers, for example, who I respect as people who work very hard and are very bright, friends from Twitter, friends from real life, and that on a sort of more policy level, I don't think you get a good reaction if I go into a committee room in Parliament and I say everyone here is a fucking scammer apart from me, and all they do is peddle shitcoins to the public. So if I start with that kind of approach, yeah, exactly, people laugh at you, and then you sound like a fucking lunatic. So I tend to couch those sorts of things in very polite language, that may be familiar to the kind of people I'm dealing with. So I will say, for example, that other coins are more akin to venture capital-backed tech companies. Bitcoin is not a company for the following reasons, which we don't need to go into here. Solana or Ethereum or Cardano those are essentially venture capital-backed technology companies. I'm a fan of venture-backed companies. Some of those companies may find product market fit, and they may find their market and then become profitable enterprises. In my view, they don't compete with Bitcoin at all, because what Bitcoin is doing is something completely different. Bitcoin, we say, is simply a non-state issued digital money that has the following properties. It's not trying to be a meme coin platform. And it's important, I think, I'm actually, this is a bit of a segue, but I'm in two minds as to whether shouting Bitcoin is not crypto is a helpful thing for us to say. I know we say that a lot in the community, but certainly when I interface with no coiners who have no interest in this sector at all, the first thing I often get back is, but isn't Bitcoin a cryptocurrency? And if you concede that, yes, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, they say, well, why do you say it's not crypto? So the way I tend to approach it is to say, kind of go the other way, say that current crypto is now such an enormous term that it's almost so big that it's meaningless. It includes everything from Bitcoin, the hard cap digital money, all the way to a meme coin traded on Solana or an NFT. But in the same way that an Excel spreadsheet is not the same as a website and is not the same as a graphics card, although they are all part of or can be manipulated on a computer, those are not the same things. And if we're capable of distinguishing between different types of things in other contexts, we should also be able to distinguish between things in a cryptocurrency context.
One thing I would like you to say for the benefit of the listeners is a unicorn fart dust, if you can, because I think when you when you say that, it just, with your accent, it just has a certain level of gravitas that I just think everyone needs to hear.
God, I did actually talk about this in Parliament and also in. Well, again, it was kind of illustrating the point that we made just there, but in the context of companies. So most people understand what a company is, and they also understand that there's a big difference between Facebook, a $2 trillion odd company that's listed on a regulated exchange and whose shares can be offered to the public, and between a company that you can incorporate in 24 hours at home and where you can be the only director and the only shareholder. So in a company context, you can't offer shares in your company to the public. Meta can, because they're highly regulated and they've gone through a lot of gates in order to be able to do that. So if we're capable of mentally distinguishing between those different types of companies and applying the different levels of risk to them that we do, then we should be able to do that to different kinds of cryptocurrency as well. Meta's a good example because its market cap is quite similar to Bitcoin's at the moment. And, call your company at home a meme coin like unicorn fart dust. So the reason we highlighted that was because that's such an absurd example of the FCA's failure to understand the market that it's trying to regulate. At the moment, the FCA categorizes all cryptocurrencies with exactly the same level of risk. Now, you with your background, you'll probably know there's a principle called same risk, same regulation. And the idea there is that when something new arises in the market, you would look to existing regulation and similar things to it, and then apply regulation that applies to those similar things to the new thing. So if two companies have got a similar risk profile, they would probably be subject to the same kind of regulation. The FCA have totally failed to do that in cryptocurrency terms. They tell the market that unicorn fart dust is equally risky to Bitcoin, and if you put money into either of them, you might lose all of it. And when you set it out step by step logically like that, I feel as though it makes sense if you want to understand it.
Yeah. The tide is turning though, right? And again, we're now in early September 2025, but in the next probably 6-8 weeks, the FCA will be allowing Bitcoin ETNs to be traded, and it's likely that some of those regulations will evolve and change.
Eventually, I think it's going to unfortunately take a lot more time than that. The FCA is institutionally and fundamentally opposed to Bitcoin in all its forms. It's only budging as a result of extreme pressure for many years. The ETN news is good. ETNs are already available on the London market, but they're not available to retail yet. So the change that you refer to is going to be opening that market up to retail investors, to you and I. We still don't have ETF access. That would be an easy win, but at the moment, the FCA don't seem to be budging on that one.
I think the way I look at it, I mean, ETNs are, we don't need to go into the details of the differences between them, but effectively you're not actually owning Bitcoin if you own an ETN anyway. I guess the way I look at it is it's at least a signal to the market of a slight relaxing. Because if at the moment they're saying it's all, you can lose all your money with this thing, and then they relax it slightly so that if you're a retail investor, you at least have got the ability to, on your AJ Bell, Hargreaves Lansdown account, whatever, buy a Bitcoin ETN within your SIP or ISA without having to buy a treasury company if that's not what you wanted to do, or if you can't take your pension and buy spot Bitcoin.
No,
The
no,
next best thing in a pension context in this country will be probably, well, arguably, an ETN that at least gives your fiat the same exposure to the fiat change in Bitcoin price. Let's put it like that. But
yeah, exactly.
you're not owning Bitcoin. But at least that's my hope, and maybe it's a naive one. But my hope is that some people in retail, or even institutionally, advisors, IFAs, etc., might say, well, if the FCA stance is changing and warming slightly, maybe I will personally do a little bit more research on this thing myself. Because now they're not saying, whoa, big red flag warning, stay away. They're saying, okay, we'll let you have this. So do you think there's any benefit from that, or am I just swallowing the hopium pill too hard?
No, no, I think there is some benefit. It's just a very long and very slow process. Uh, so you say the FCA might have been approving of the ETNs. It's worth reading the statement from the guy who actually made the announcement, and you can see he's basically having his arm twisted up behind him, and he's basically made this statement through gritted teeth, and he still sneaks in a thing saying, these are unregulated and you may lose all of your money. Actually, on losing your money point, I saw an interesting piece of data recently. It was about the biggest destructions of value in history. So the current biggest loss, I think, is still Enron at about, what was that, $70 billion destroyed, and the next biggest is Evergrande. Obviously, Bitcoin at the moment is $2 trillion. No asset in history has ever gone to zero from that kind of size. And it's not even as if Bitcoin is a liability or has any counterparty risk. It's astonishing that someone would be stupid enough to say that a $2 trillion asset is suddenly going to vanish overnight. But, the FCA is full of incredibly stupid people, so I shouldn't be
Well, and
surprised.
back to the previous point of the curve of, I'm sure everyone who works for the FCA is very well remunerated and have zero need for Bitcoin. And in fact, Bitcoin starts to challenge their very existence. So why would you're not going to get a turkey to vote for Christmas? It's a challenge to get the FCA to vote for Bitcoin in that analogy.
Well, I mean, like my friend I was referring to earlier, the one who loves the PRC, I don't think people at the FCA can really understand that a monetary system can exist that's outside the rules that they can control. It's like suddenly discovering aliens, or no, I don't know, not non-organic, inorganic life forms or something like this. It just breaks their worldview. The idea that I can send money to a dissident in China and that Xi Jinping can't stop me doing that is incomprehensible to my mate, and he doesn't like that because he automatically goes to, oh well, how? What? Surely pedos will love this. Everything seems to devolve to pedos, doesn't it? It's just
Or drugs, or yeah, it's pedos or drugs, or it's the lowest forms of society that are going to suddenly love this thing.
and the data doesn't support that. The latest data I've seen from Chainalysis suggests that 0.14% of all cryptocurrency transactions were illicit. 0.14, it's not even half a percent. So more than 99.5% of transactions made using cryptocurrency were completely legitimate. I mean, these people just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and choose to ignore. Were they called TD Bank, the Canadian bank that were fined? I'm going to make the numbers up because my memory isn't photographic like yours, but I think it was TD Bank in Canada that were fined like $3 billion. No one went to jail, but they were known as the friendly bank for money laundering.
Doesn't
And
surprise me.
yeah, so it's like there's countless examples of traditional finance and banking where people have, or businesses rather, have been proven to be friendly for wrong-uns, and yet and it continues to be that way. So it's crazy to throw that Bitcoin and say, well, it can't succeed because a criminal might use it once. So it's just pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the number of fines that JP Morgan has had over the years, for example, just I think it was last year, it turned out that Evgeny Prigozhin, Putin's Wagner right-hand man as was, before his unfortunate demise, his businesses had got accounts at JP Morgan and HSBC and had happily been laundering money through them for years. AML doesn't work, inconveniences small people, and the criminals just root around it.
Yeah, yeah. And
Neither group uses Bitcoin.
exactly. Yes. Well, unfortunately, that's just the situation we're in, isn't it? I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, sadly.
No, no, probably not. Until, as you mentioned earlier, I think if the pips squeak and things get high, things get difficult enough for people to notice. And I think you also make a good point around tax-favored investment in Bitcoin. So, obviously, unlike certain Labour ministers, we all want to pay the tax that we are legally obliged to pay. Obviously, no reference to any particular Labour minister is intended there. But at the moment, if you buy and hold spot Bitcoin, you do have to pay CGT on it if you were to sell it. And exposure to the ETFs or the ETNs or to treasury companies in your SIP or in your ISA allows you to have that tax-favoured exposure to the price, I suppose.
Yeah. Is exposure to the fiat equivalent price of the Bitcoin in a tax-free wrapper. But of course, again, we don't need to go down the mine on that here and now, but to a Bitcoin maxi, fiat minimalist, that isn't where you should be putting any of your money probably. But again, the reality for the majority of people is I've got bills to pay. I'm likely to want spot Bitcoin in self-custody, but at the same time, I don't really want to be selling that for various reasons, whether it's my future fund, whether it's because I don't want to be taxed on it. Well, these other options that are still Bitcoin-like, even if it's not, they're aligned to Bitcoin. So you get the benefits of Bitcoin fiat appreciation without actually having to pay tax, or for some people, it might even be the self-custody is a bit too scary as well. Again, I know that's not very Bitcoin maxi, and once you do the research and find out how important sovereignty is, self-sovereignty, you're more likely to find a way that works for you to do that. But for a lot of people, that's quite a big step.
I think if you're a true libertarian, though, the basic principle is that, other people telling me what to do can just fuck off. So, yeah, you can have your opinion that you should only hold spot Bitcoin, but, that will make your life difficult in certain respects, like, I don't know, just shopping on your high street. Sad reality of the matter is that we're in the process of normalization of Bitcoin, and things like the ETFs or the treasury companies is a step towards normalization. My normie friends are much more likely to buy shares in an ETF or a treasury company than they are at the moment to go out and buy a cold card and learn how to do fully air-gapped, partially signed Bitcoin transactions. Some of us like doing that kind of stuff. Not everyone does. And, much like most things, I'm curious as to how my car works. I'm not a mechanic. I don't fully understand it. I still drive all the time. Most people don't understand how their phone or their computer works. They use them every day.
Or banking, and yet they keep their money
Well, yeah.
in an app on their phone. So, I mean, it's very much the same, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
So the other thing I wanted to touch on, Freddie, was how you've balanced doing the work you've done for Bitcoin Policy UK alongside a more traditional fiat, high-powered job doing all your legalese stuff, and quite how those things balance off, and to what extent you've had to kind of, on one hand, dial down the Bitcoin while on the other the Bitcoin is what it's all about.
If I'm being flippant by not sleeping and drinking too much in the evenings, probably. Being slightly less flippant. I'm just not easy, and I don't want this to be a sob story or for anyone to think I'm out for sympathy. But so the Bitcoin policy stuff is all done in our spare time, and this is true for the whole team actually.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't take a salary. We run everything on a shoestring. We're continually on the verge of running out of money. Weirdly, people don't seem to. We've got some very good corporate supporters, some of whom you know, but actually getting funds to keep running is tough. So that's a continual source of stress. And then on the flip side, you've got your day job and then kids and other commitments as well. So the short answer is you don't sleep a huge amount, and it's very stressful having to juggle everything. Particularly, and this is a silly point, particularly when your diaries don't always match up. So I'd have a Bitcoin diary, a personal diary, and a work diary, and very often people would plonk calls in at exactly the same time, and then I suddenly find that I've supposed to got 3 calls all happening at the same time, and then you'll know this. Desperately trying to run around and rearrange them is extremely stressful. Sometimes it feels as though you spend more time arranging and rearranging calls than you do actually on the calls.
Obviously, you can prioritize things in life in general, and dropping your family probably isn't a credible option. Dropping the job that you do to earn money to support that family isn't really an option. But for most people, unless you're financially secure and don't need to earn that money. Have there ever been times where you've thought, I believe in this and I want to carry on contributing to help drive Bitcoin advocacy in the UK, but I can't do it anymore?
When I started, I thought I'd try and do a full cycle. So I started contributing to parliamentary evidence in 21 or 22, I think it was, before Bitcoin policy. We founded that in 23, so a full cycle, I suppose, would take me to about 2027. So in terms of the policy work, I've always set out with a view that I do a full cycle and then sort of reassess. As time has gone by, as you mentioned just before we started, I've actually jumped from being split between fiat and Bitcoin to actually working in a Bitcoin business, which we may touch on in a moment. But maybe before we do that, I went to a really good training session years ago where they kind of divided your life into quadrants. I think it was work, family, friends, and health. And the advice was that you could only really, as an adult, prioritize 2 of those well at any one time, and the other 2 are going to suffer. And so at the moment, I think I definitely prioritize work and family. I very rarely get to see my friends anymore, and my health is in a terrible state. Not sleeping, not training, eating poorly, and so on. So I think that's what I seem to be prioritized at the moment, but that may ring true for a lot of people.
You're looking pretty healthy from where I'm sitting, where I'm standing, rather.
My body fat percentage is far too high at the moment. Don't tempt me.
Yeah, but you hold yourself up against the standards that Arnold Schwarzenegger set. So maybe it's just that your bar is set too high, Freddie.
He set them very well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of Bitcoiners would dream of having your level of body fat. But let's move on from that. So you alluded there to another development in your career path within Bitcoin. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so this is maybe a sort of small scoop for you, although there is going to be a degree of publicity on this in the near future. So I announced a few months ago I was moving on from my fiat job, and I'd been offered a position at Coin Corner as their chief strategy officer. As it turned out, when we got into discussions, they actually asked me to head up a new venture that they were essentially spinning out. So the new company is called BHODL. I'm going to be the CEO there. Some of the Coin Corner team are joining the board to operate it. And the play is it's a new treasury and Bitcoin services company. And the business model is very simple. We go to the markets, we raise money, we buy as much Bitcoin as we can as quickly as we can on the treasury side. But the key thing that made me excited about this was that we really want to turn this into a Lightning node running company for 2 reasons, really. Firstly, that we've got incredible in-house talent and experience in terms of building and running Lightning nodes, with the Coin Corner guys coming across. Some of them have been working on Lightning since it was first released. And we believe that becoming an integral part of the Lightning Network and a node runner of renown contributes to the stability, reliability, and really the wider dissemination of the network from base principles. Secondly, we're buying a lot of Bitcoin. We want to do something with that. And you'll know that it's very traditionally been very hard to work out where yield comes from. Alan Farrington's favourite shirt. We believe that if we optimize our nodes that we're going to build for routing, we'll be able to generate between 1 and 9.7% on routing fees, which is what the market is showing is capable of hitting at the moment. So day one, we've got access to a 5-year-old, very well ranked node that we're leasing for a period of 40 years from Coin Corner. So we're going to hit the ground running on day one. And again, yeah, this is a bit of a spoiler because we're still in the process of coming to market. Day one of IPO, we'll be buying Bitcoin and then begin the process of deploying that into our first node. And then during the first year, we want to build maybe between 5 to 10 new nodes during the course of the year. And
okay, that's firstly, congratulations. That sounds really exciting, and wish you loads of luck. So with the yield that the business will earn, would that just go back into buying more Bitcoin? You wouldn't, or would it be possibly a dividend play to investors, or?
We'll probably keep it in Bitcoin. Initially, the first aim of the company is to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible, so like a normal treasury company would. And the idea is that we go to market again, raise more money, buy more Bitcoin, and explore. Really, the focus for the first 12 months, the first year is focusing on Lightning and on those nodes. And then we have a couple of other business lines in mind that I can't disclose yet, which we'll investigate as well during the course of that first year. So the aim is to become a Bitcoin services company as well as having the treasury function as well.
Yeah. So, but in effect, having the treasury function bolted on to running the Lightning nodes drives additional yield and Bitcoin yield to shareholders. So in effect, it's not just like you're sitting on, make a number up, 50 Bitcoin. Those 50 Bitcoin, or some of them, are working to earn more Bitcoin as well, rather than just raising more capital to buy more Bitcoin.
Yeah, we literally create a flywheel in-house that enables us to raise capital, buy Bitcoin, deploy Bitcoin. And actually, funnily, Alan Farrington is joining the board, so he can wear his "Where does the yield come from?" shirt for us, and say, "Yeah, this is where the yield comes from."
Yeah, he can put BHODL underneath as a response for where it comes from. And how many Lightning nodes are there? I've got no idea.
There's about 14,000 worldwide.
Okay.
And the one we're getting is ranked in the top 100 of those 14,000.
Okay. And obviously, most Bitcoiners are aware that Lightning is outside of on-chain transactions because it's quick and really cheap and trustworthy and easy for those transactions to happen. If you're buying a coffee, you're not going to buy it on chain, you're going to buy it on Lightning. But where do you see Lightning as something that is going to keep on growing and helping drive engagement in Bitcoin outside of just a number go up, and to maybe a different audience as well of people that might discover Bitcoin through that?
I think that's right. So certainly in terms of investor discussions, we've tended to think about Bitcoin in sort of three lenses. One as the asset that we all understand, second as a network, and then third as an ecosystem of businesses. And those three concepts really tick each of the three pieces of I think that sort of at least two of the three pieces of what is money: store of value, a medium of exchange. So Bitcoin, the asset, we know its compound annual growth rate is higher than most other assets in history. Over the last 5 years, it ranges between, I think, 45 and 55%, which is pretty astonishing. So just by holding the asset, you're obviously having a benefit from that compound annual growth rate. In terms of the network, the total addressable market for paytech is gigantic. So Swift, for example, processes, I think, 1.3 quadrillion of value every year. Visa and MasterCard, the scheme payments rules, also process a huge amount of value. Bax and Chaps as well. And then that's even before you think about cross-border remittances, which I think is a fantastic market that the Lightning Network is ripe to exploit. I don't know if you've used the Send Globally product, have you, that Strike and Coin Corner have pioneered?
I do use Strike, but I'm not aware of that.
Have a look, and maybe look on Twitter for Pouch. I fucking love this. It's another
Okay.
step towards normalization of the Lightning simply as a payment network. So let's say you're in the Philippines and you've got the Pouch app. You don't need to know anything about Bitcoin. You just connect your Pouch app to your e-money account or your bank account. You in London can then send £10 either over Strike or over Coin Corner to your contact who's using Pouch in the Philippines. There's a real-time conversion of your £10 to Bitcoin sent over Lightning to the Philippines, real-time conversion back at the other end. So there's no slippage, there's no FX risk because it's
Yes.
instantaneous. And it goes plonked into local currency, into their bank account, almost in real time, virtually for no fee at all.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
mad.
I had no idea that even existed. That's fantastic.
It's an incredible piece of pay tech. And when you think that companies like Western Union charge, 10, 12, 15%, even more sometimes, for sending money cross border,
Yeah. And
I think,
presumably there's a much longer period of time. I've got no idea with Western Union, but I'm sure it's not an instantaneous payment receipt the other end, I would imagine.
no, it can take days.
Yeah. So it's, there's just an infinite way. This just sounds a completely game changing opportunity. And as the way you described it, the recipient doesn't even really have to know anything about Bitcoin or give a shit about Bitcoin. It's just I
Exactly.
want my Australian dollars. Send them to me. Okay, they'll be with you in 30 seconds, and you just use the
Completely right. Well, I mean, that's great. You see, you get it within like 2 minutes. And I think it would be nice if people who worked in Paytech got it as quickly as that.
I could be available for hire for the right price.
Yeah.
I'll put that out there.
Yeah, but if you just think about the total addressable market for cross-border transfers, but that's only possible if you've got a very, very reliable Lightning network with enormous amounts of capacity in it. So if you're looking for large cross-border settlements to be made, I don't yet know if it's possible for the Lightning network to handle that amount of liquidity. As I say, only 14,000 nodes, not many of them are very well capitalized yet. I think the next 5 to 10 years, it's crucially important that companies like BHODL build out and participate in the network in order, I think, fully to exploit Bitcoin's potential as a payment network. And actually, what we were saying earlier around people not knowing how the banking system works, that's totally fine. In a weird way, I want to live in a world where people don't care about Bitcoin because they don't need to anymore.
It just works. It just
Exactly,
is.
exactly. So we're just
Yeah.
sending money to each other. You're sending value as easily as you send an email, and you don't need to understand how SMTP works or how
No.
TCP/IP works because most
Yeah.
people already don't.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really exciting. And so when when this information is available publicly, will there be a retail offering? So will people like me be able to apply for the IPO?
Yes, absolutely do. So we're listing on the Aquis Exchange, which is where SmartWeb is listed. There will be a wrap offer, which is offered to retail. That will be hopefully the first of many. But yes, so keep an eye out for RNS announcements coming on the IPO. There will be a period of wrap offer. You'll probably need to either call your broker or go via Interactive Investor. Hargreaves Lansdown should be offering the stock within a day or so of IPO, provided there's enough liquidity and there are at least two market makers making a price in the stock. AJ Bella unfortunately say they no longer offer IPOs, which is irritating. But Interactive Investor should. The RNS will have details of how to get in touch directly with Winterflood, who will be running the wrap. So yeah, we very much want retail investors to participate in the business as well. And the more the merrier, from my perspective.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So yeah, that's a bit of exciting news there. And
Yeah.
how do you has it been quite what's the word I'm looking for? Stressful, I guess, with the way that the way I guess in general in that process, but specifically the last few weeks where with the treasury companies, MNAVs have all contracted and Bitcoin's, come down from $124,000 to 106, 108, 110, and everyone's feeling a bit doom and gloom. At that time when you're looking at launching a business that is trying to raise money for Bitcoin, that might be quite a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, probably would have been less stressful if we'd been doing it in June. But then again, I suppose you might have been worried about the euphoria then. So it's hard to predict
Yeah,
how you would have
yeah,
reacted. I think that the main stress is actually just the simple process of going through an IPO, which is complicated, time-consuming, and involves a lot of box ticking. I don't know if you've ever done
And
one.
lawyers and accountants. I mean, they're the
Yes,
worst, aren't they, Freddie?
well, exactly. Yeah, continual last-minute demands for new pieces of paper. So I won't be sorry when we're public. At least maybe I shouldn't say that. Don't want to tempt fate. I'll be glad when we're public and we can move on to the next set of challenges.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. So bringing it back round to Bitcoin again, then where do you see the UK engagement with Bitcoin evolving over the next few years? Obviously, with America and Trump, there's been a real catalyst, at least politically, and the likes of BlackRock and co really embracing it, launching the most successful ETF. Do you think we've got a chance in this country, or do you think we're always going to be on catch up or worse?
I'd like to say we have a chance, and that's one of the reasons we're launching the new business in Britain. There's a lot of talent here, both in finance and computing, and payments and fintech, and we really want to be a part of that. I think the UK missing Bitcoin so badly is connected, I believe, to some of the establishment points we made earlier. The decision makers and regulators, if I had to sum up their attitude towards it, it would be closing their eyes and putting their fingers in their ears and hoping it was going to go away, which isn't the right way to respond to a new technology. But unfortunately, those are the people that are in those kind of positions. My contemporaries, for example. And I think they've been taken by surprise and put on the back foot by what's happening in America. And there'll be a degree, I think, of backlash against it because of Trump and the opinions people in the UK have of Trump. And, probably the Democrats will respond similarly in the United States. The flip side of that is that if they manage to pass these pieces of legislation in the US, the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, the Anti-CBDC Act, to the extent that those are passed, then they are increasingly difficult to unwind by a future president. So it's worth keeping an eye, I think, on what happens legislatively rather than by executive order in the US, because that will probably set the course for the next 5 to 10 years. The UK, I don't think in reality can catch up any longer, which is sad, but it can definitely do better than it is at the moment.
Okay. Well, so maybe reasons to be cheerful, or
I'm quite an optimistic person. I think there's always reason to be cheerful as long as you're breathing. So yeah, let's go with that.
yeah, let's go with that. Bitcoin doesn't need the UK to embrace it to be successful. Bitcoin is inevitable. It's just really for us as people who live in the UK and probably on the whole don't want to leave. It's in our vested interest that the UK does take it seriously and embrace it for the technology and the life changing benefits that Bitcoin can bring, so that we aren't as a nation left even further behind some of the other countries that are really taking it on board.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes people say, what's the point of talking to politicians? They're all pointless. Bitcoin doesn't need them. Unfortunately, politicians, if left to their own devices, make very bad laws that do affect you. For example, you can't lend your Bitcoin at the moment without that being deemed a chargeable gain, even if you're transferring it as collateral. So if you're a law-abiding citizen, you then need to pay tax on a transaction that isn't a disposal. How is that fair? That's incorrect law that needs to be changed. And that's just one example. Or another example, you want to transfer money from your bank account to your exchange, and your exchange blocks it, or your bank shuts your account, where you've made a perfectly legitimate use of your bank account. Banks shouldn't be allowed to do that. They shouldn't be allowed to have a policy that they will block people who are trying to send money to cryptocurrency exchanges. So those are just two examples of stupid law or bad policy that are a direct result of politicians not understanding what's going on.
Yeah. And yet, if you want to put it into an online gambling account and put it all on the 330 at Chepstow, you can fill your boots.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. But sadly, that's the world we live in right now. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to be really respectful of your time, Freddie. You're a very, very busy man. You always have been a very busy man. It sounds like you're even busier than you have been.
I'm sorry it's taken us such a long time to speak. My fault. I do apologise.
No, it's great that we've managed to catch up, because you're someone that was high on my list of people I wanted to talk to. So it's
Thank
I
you.
think I'm now up to my low 30s of episodes, but I think I've
Awesome.
been trying to pin you down from probably the first 5. But there we
Well,
go.
thank you very much.
we're here now. And sadly, I don't think you're able to make it to the conference we're having in Bury St Edmunds either this year, but
Don't
hopefully,
think so. I
yeah.
mean, like I've mentioned, it's my sister's birthday that day, and I've also got this other rather massive piece of work going on.
Yeah. And you've. I'm sure I'll be speaking on behalf of a lot of Bitcoiners when I say thank you for all the work you have done for Bitcoin. So the fact you have to miss out on a conference in Bury St Edmunds is a fairly small price that the rest of us have to pay for not having you with us on the day, I think.
That's very kind of you, mate. Thank you. Well, best of luck with the rest of the pod. I'm very pleased that you invited me on. Thank you.
Yeah, and before I let you go, the last question I ask all the guests is, what's one belief you held before Bitcoin that you've completely changed your mind about?
Ooh, that's a good question. Possibly that the government knew what it was doing. I mean, I'm not sure if I believed that before Bitcoin, but I definitely don't now. So perhaps that's it.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, Freddie, where's the best place? X, do you think?
Yes, exactly. I'm at Freddie New there. I'm also on Nostr as well, and NPub is in my profile.
Or just do a search on X for unexpected or expected, and I'm sure one of your one of your posts will pop up.
Oh, possibly.
Okay. Well, thanks again for coming on. Best of luck with everything. Yeah, well, I'm excited to see how things pan out with this new business. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much. Lovely to speak. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, cheers. Cheers then. Bye.
Take care.